How many times have you kept silent just to avoid losing someone's smile? How many times have you reshaped yourself until you no longer recognized your own outline? How many pieces of yourself have you sacrificed just to hear, "You are incredible"? It is safer to be feared than to be loved, whispers Carl Jung. And almost no one listens to what comes after. Because hearing that hurts, and it hurts because it strikes exactly where we bleed the most, our hunger to be accepted. From the beginning, we were taught that to be seen is to live, that to be validated is to exist. Like well-trained lambs, we learn to smile at the right moment, to bow without knowing why. We became experts in playing roles, public heroes, yet exiles of ourselves. Do you see it? Do you see how you were domesticated to adapt, to say yes, even when your soul was screaming no? This message is not about self-help. It is not about self-esteem. It is a call to ruin, to the destruction of the illusion you still carry. Because perhaps, and I say this while looking into the eyes of your shadow, what you call love is nothing but conditioning. Perhaps what you call connection is only a silent contract. I will be what you need if you give me what I cannot give myself. But whoever lives like this is already dead, only forgot to lie down. That is why this can be dangerous, because if you stay until the end, something inside you will die, and that death is a blessing. I do not want to offer you comfort. I want to offer you broken mirrors. I want to invoke the name of the man who dared to say that people do not desire freedom, they desire comfort. And I want to show you why Carl Jung understood something about the human soul that many still refuse to face. Validation is the most effective weapon of voluntary servitude. From now on, in every step, we will dissect this together. Without masks, without unnecessary affection, without the theater of kindness, only you, silence, and the truth that was always waiting on the other side of applause. If you still want to continue, breathe deeply. What comes next will hurt. Have you noticed that even when you are alone, it feels as if someone is watching? Not through the eyes of others, but through the eyes you yourself implanted inside. A gaze that watches you, judges you, demands of you. An invisible audience, relentless, silent, yet real. The truth that few dare admit is simple. You live for an audience. Every gesture is a rehearsal, every word an attempt to be accepted. And the worst part is that you no longer know where you end and where the performance begins. Since childhood, before even understanding right and wrong, there were already applauses and censures shaping your bones. That was the beginning of the cage disguised as love. What a good child when he obeys. She is perfect, so well behaved. And so the need for approval was stitched to your identity as if it was skin. But here is the dark secret nobody told you. This addiction does not scream like alcohol, does not destroy like drugs. It whispers, it rewards, it caresses while it destroys, and that is why it enslaves so deeply. Validation is a leash scented with affection. You learn to act out tenderness to be touched. You learn to contain your rage to be accepted. You learn to smile with empty eyes, just so you will not disturb. But who are you without all of this? There is a phrase from Carl Jung that burns like a blade. Not to be admired, that is the greatest freedom. And why does it terrify us so? Because it reminds us that our craving to be seen is often desperation in disguise, an implosion suffocated with makeup. The desire to be admired does not come from self-love, but from the fear of being invisible. And you feel that deeply when your message is not returned, when no one likes your post, when your idea is ignored, Rage arrives, frustration arrives, but beneath it all is the brutal fear of non-existence. For whoever defines himself through the reaction of the other always lives delayed. You do not speak because you have something to say. You speak to provoke response. You do not act from conviction, but from expectation. It is the reflection that moves you, not the source. And thus you become moldable. With every gaze, you change shape. With every silence, you empty a little more. You become a fragile sculpture, made of borrowed gestures, molded not by the hands of authenticity, but by the fingers hungry for acceptance. And here enters Carl Jung, the man so often misunderstood as cold or cruel, but who in truth saw something terrifyingly human. Man forgets more quickly the death of a father than the loss of property. Meaning for most, what matters is not truth, but what feeds the image they have of themselves. And what is the need for validation, if not a symbolic inheritance? You fight to protect the image others have of you, even if it costs you your soul. What makes this addiction so insidious is that it disguises itself as virtue. You call empathy what is often only fear of rejection. You say you are sensitive, but in truth, you are terrified of being hated. And the burning question at the heart of it all is this: if nobody were watching, would you still do what you do? How many times have you hesitated to be honest because you feared losing admiration? How many times have you chosen silence, not out of wisdom, but out of cowardice? And how many of those cowardices did you wrap with pretty words to preserve your image? Validation became an addiction because it offers a quick dose of belonging. But the price is brutal. You trade freedom for applause, clarity for noise, and when you realize it, you no longer know if the laughter you just gave was yours or that of the character you invented to survive. Worse still, you begin to depend on it, and every absence of approval becomes a crisis. You measure the worth of your words by reactions. You dress not for what you love, but for what others expect. You walk through life's corridors like a hologram, trying to please everyone who passes. But the one who pleases everyone is loved by no one, only tolerated, and that is a grief few dare to endure. For to admit that you live to be seen is to admit that until now you may not have truly lived. Tell me then, how many of your dreams are truly yours, and how many are fantasies you created to be applauded? Here is where the divided self is born, the one who smiles while bleeding, who speaks softly while screaming within, who is celebrated but feels nothing. And that emptiness has no remedy, for it can only be filled by one thing: integrity. But integrity is costly, because to be whole today means to lose followers, friends, compliments, opportunities. It means to disturb, to confront, to provoke. It means to hear the words, "You have changed." And the answer, if you have courage, will be, "I finally returned to who I was before I wanted to be loved." Validation is an invisible addiction because it hides behind the noblest intentions. And the cure is not contempt for others, but reunion with silence. Silence that no one applauds, silence where no echo is needed, silence where true power begins to emerge, not the noisy kind full of ostentation, but the quiet power of one who no longer needs to be understood. And when you reach that point, when you stop acting, something dies. But what is born finally carries weight, because now every step you take is no longer rehearsal, it is presence. Before we continue, have you noticed that the more you try to stay calm, the faster you shatter inside? That is not weakness, it is mental overload. We live saturated with emotional noise, and nobody taught us how to filter what matters. The true problem lies in the lack of inner structure. Most act from emotion without knowing it is possible to construct a cold, firm, controlled way of operating. And yes, it can be trained. You say you want to be loved, but by whom? And at what cost? Strange how no one dares to ask this aloud. We crave love as though it were an unquestionable right, a prize the universe must deliver simply because we exist. But the truth is different, so uncomfortable that we call trauma what is in reality wounded vanity. Because deep down, most of us do not want love. We want admiration, reverence, approval, the glow in another's eyes as our certificate of existence. That is why being loved has been killing you inside, because to be loved, you are willing to deform yourself, to be quieter, funnier, more convenient, to lower your voice, hide your chaos, and wrap your truth in silk. But what remains after all this? A ghost, a digestible copy of who you once were. And here is where the mirror enters. You look, hoping to see yourself, but you only find what others expect. Then, the ritual begins. You comb your hair as they wish, behave as they like. You smile at the right moment, say what is acceptable. Yet with each concession, a piece of you slips down the drain of consciousness. You begin to lose yourself, becoming so light that you turn into vapor. To love and to be loved, they say. But as Carl Jung would remind us, love, the very love you desperately seek, can turn into a battlefield. When it is loaded with expectation, it transforms into dependence. And where there is dependence, there is no power, there is only submission. Those from whom you crave affection are the very ones who learn to manipulate your emptiness. They know where to press. They know that silence, a disapproving look, or a subtle withdrawal is enough to bring you to your knees because you need to be wanted, accepted, understood. That need makes you vulnerable. It makes you trainable. But what if you no longer needed it? What if you embraced the horror of not being loved, of being seen as cold, arrogant, unapproachable? Could you endure it? Most cannot. That is why they remain captive. They love the reflection, but despise the mirror when it reveals what is too raw. So they edit themselves, like someone who spends an entire life repeating lines from a script nobody hears. There is something tragic in being the kind of person loved only while pretending. You feel it, don't you? That bitter sensation after a conversation where you didn't say what you wanted. That fake laugh echoing in memory like a strangled cry. It is the price of affection bought on credit. You adapt because you fear abandonment. But what is more terrifying? Being alone or being surrounded by people who love a version of you that does not exist? Many insist, but that's who I am. Gentle, empathetic, kind, and maybe you are. But are you sure that kindness is truly yours? Or was it trained into you so you would be easier to accept? This isn't about cruelty, it's about truth. And truth is often unpleasant, yet it is the only thing with weight. Carl Jung wrote that whoever does not bring their shadow into the light remains enslaved by it. Perhaps your shadow is precisely that, the compulsive need to please, to be the good one, the balanced one, the acceptable one. Yet inside, there is fire, anger, frustration, truths suffocated for years, waiting for release. But that moment never comes, because you sabotage it. You keep chasing love, even when it costs you your integrity. And love born from self-abandonment is always fragile, always conditional. The day you say no, it evaporates. That is why you live in fear, because the love you received was never unconditional, but a performance contract. On stage, there is no presence, only a character. Yet here lies the secret that freed those brave enough to face it. You do not need to be loved by everyone. In fact, you need very little love. What you need is truth, and truth is often solitary. When you choose truth over affection, everything shifts. Your stance, your voice, even your silence. Some will hate you for it, others will respect you deeply, but none will ignore you, because there is something magnetic about a person who does not need to be loved. Someone who does not change their tone to avoid conflict. Someone who does not dress to please. Someone who enters a room without scanning for approval. That person is not easily manipulated, not easily replaced. That person is dangerous, and that is why they are remembered. So, who do you want to be? The reflection molded by others' eyes, or the presence that, though misunderstood, remains whole? Being loved is not the problem. The problem is the price you pay for it. And if you must lose something in this life, let it not be yourself. Applause. Have you ever thought about what it really means? Yes, it feels pleasant, almost hypnotic, but behind the sound lies what no one dares to face. Applause is always an echo. It never validates who you are. It only rewards who you pretend to be. And if that is true, why keep living for that sound? Since the beginning of time, social approval has been sold as a symbol of success. Whoever is cheered is admired. Whoever is noticed is valued. But valued by whom? And according to whose standards? The same ones who cheer you today may crucify you tomorrow. Not because you failed, but because you dared to change. The crowd does not love those who evolve. It only loves those who fit. And here is the cruel irony. The more you chase approval, the weaker you become. Because each time you earn acceptance, a new fear is born, the fear of losing it. And so you adapt, censor, and betray yourself in small doses just to maintain what you gained. You bow before the invisible tribunal of public opinion, even knowing it kills you inside. But what is the real cost of constant approval? You grow addicted to the comfort of conformity. You no longer speak your mind, only what is expected. You no longer act with courage, but with caution. With every safe choice, every pleasing step, you reinforce the bars of your own cell. The crowd is a demanding lover. It wants you to shine, but never brighter than itself. It wants you to stand out, but only within its script. It wants you to be authentic, but only as long as your truth does not disturb it. So it gives you applause, but with chains on your ankles. You think you fly, but you are only spinning in circles inside the cage. And the worst part? The key is in your pocket, but you fear using it, because opening the door means facing silence, absence, and incomprehension. For many, that is more terrifying than the lie itself. Look around. We live in an age where everyone wants to be seen, but almost no one wants to be real. No one speaks without calculation. No one dares to be unpleasant, even when truth demands it. We live surrounded by avatars that smile with one hand extended while the other hides a fist. And you wonder why you are so exhausted. It is because there is a fatigue that no sleep or vacation can heal. It is simple. You are trying to exist among characters, trying to be real in a world that rewards masks. Social approval is the currency of that theater. You step on stage, say your lines, receive applause, but when the lights go out, only emptiness remains, an echo inside your chest. Because deep down, you know it was all a lie. You can have the world at your feet and still feel like a fraud, because whoever lives for others dies in their hands. And this is not exaggeration. it is historical. Look at public figures who rose like gods and fell like demons, not for crimes, but for daring to break the projections imposed on them. Society does not forgive authenticity when it disrupts comfort. Carl Jung knew this. He understood that real power is not won by votes. It is not imposed by brute force, but through emotional independence. Those who seek approval live in debt. Debt to parents, friends, colleagues, followers, always owing, always expecting applause as repayment. And when it doesn't arrive, desperation appears. But here is the final provocation. What if you stopped caring? Not cynically, not as one who escapes pain, but as one who accepts fully that the only approval that matters is your own. At first it feels strange, cold, even cruel. But slowly, something changes. You begin to speak with more clarity, act with more firmness, stop apologizing for your intensity. And then something surprising happens. Those who once applauded disappear, but others arrive. People who don't want your performance, they want your presence. People who aren't unsettled by your firmness, but inspired by it. Because when you shatter the illusion of social approval, something within you awakens, and that awakening is violent. You realize you lived half your life on a stage, performing a script you did not write. But now you break it, turn off the spotlights, step down, and for the first time, touch the ground. Imagine a person walking without hurry, not explaining, not bending. People notice, but cannot define what he carries. It is not arrogance, it is not coldness, it is something far deeper. It is the silence of someone who no longer depends on being seen in order to exist. Have you ever met such a person? Probably not, because that kind of presence is rare. He does not demand attention, yet he cannot be ignored, not because he raises his voice, but because his very existence carries gravity. He holds something most people have lost, the ability to stand on his own, free from dependence on validation. He does not breathe through applause. He does not survive on likes, and he does not collapse when misunderstood. That is what makes him so unsettling in a world trained to depend on recognition and approval. Carl Jung would see in this figure not a tyrant or a showman, but the archetype of sovereignty, an individual who governs himself without asking for permission, who does not lead through spectacle, but through inner clarity. He is not feared because of cruelty, but because he cannot be broken. Such strength does not come from adding more, but from giving up what enslaves, the need for constant affirmation, the craving to perform, the dependency on emotional approval. This man has known collapse. He has been shattered, betrayed himself in the name of belonging, endured humiliation for the hope of being loved. He tried to preserve bridges that only led into emptiness. And then one day, in exhaustion, he woke up. That awakening did not arrive with gentle music or the light of dawn. It arrived like destruction, everything falling apart at once. And in the ruins he realized, I don't need this anymore. And in that moment, this, all of it, lost its hold. The craving for parental recognition, the need for colleagues' respect, the conditional affection of relationships, the mask worn for unseen audiences, all dissolved. And when he no longer needed to be looked at, for the first time, he began to see. His eyes cut through the fog of dependence. He recognized that most bonds were mere transactions, that praise always carried hidden debts, that the love he received was conditional on constant compliance. And then he felt something rare, indifference, not a defensive numbness, but a neutrality rooted in freedom. He ceased caring about other people's judgments. And that is where his danger began. Because a man who does not fear rejection cannot be controlled. A man who does not need to please cannot be manipulated. A man who refuses to beg for love cannot be domesticated. We live in an age where sensitivity is a currency of belonging, where showing wounds becomes strategy. But the man who has endured fracture does not expose his scars to buy affection. He keeps them as reminders, silent weapons that speak not of cruelty, but of memory. He does not conform. He does not bend into shapes demanded by crowds. He is respected because bending him is impossible. People test him. They provoke with silence, with absence, expecting him to break, to chase, to explain. But he remains unmoved. His calmness erodes those who live off approval. Nietzsche said, "The snake that cannot shed its skin perishes." Yet another truth exists. The man who sheds his skin endlessly to please others never finds his own. This man has found his. It is not smooth or polished. It is rough, scarred, but it is authentically his, and he refuses to exchange it. He learned to eat alone, to rise without morning messages, to sleep without someone saying, "Good night." Not from arrogance, but because he discovered that depending on others to feel whole is slow death. And here lies the paradox. When he no longer sought, people began to seek him. When he no longer spoke, his silence became a roar. When he left the stage, all eyes turned toward him. But by then, he was already gone, unavailable to be consumed. He is no longer a product of consolation. He offers only presence. And in a world built on masks and constant performance, pure presence is threatening. The one who does not beg for company becomes a reference point. The one who does not ask to be seen becomes the one followed. He is not unbreakable because he cannot be hurt, but because he no longer fears loss. He already lost the illusions, and what remains is real. There is a funeral to attend, but no flowers, no eulogies, only silence. The burial of the agreeable man, the one who smiled while his soul was torn apart, who apologized for existing too strongly, who edited himself into palatable versions for fragile minds, the one who read every room, molding himself into whatever was required. That man must die. It terrifies you because you were raised to believe that pleasing was a virtue, that kindness guaranteed love. But nobody told you the cost: self-destruction. You gave yourself away piece by piece until you no longer knew what was true and what was performance. And yet, despite all your efforts, you remained alone, because deep down, you knew they did not love you. They loved the mask. And however much the mask smiles, it is heavy. Over time, it fuses with the skin, and you forget the face beneath. Sartre wrote, "Hell is other people." But perhaps true hell is depending on others to know who you are. The agreeable man inhabits that hell. Every concession digs deeper his grave, yet there is a way out, and it is violent. You must disappoint. You must allow misinterpretation. You must accept being called cold, arrogant, too much. You must allow abandonment and not treat it as tragedy, but as release, because it is at that breaking point that rebirth begins. Rebirth is not poetic. It is solitary. It is brutal. It is tearing away the self that begged for love, bleeding for the first time for something real. It is saying no without explanation, speaking without measuring reactions, dressing for yourself, leaving conversations, letting others down without apology. Each act is another shovel of earth over the grave of the agreeable. And slowly, you discover a silence that carries power. You no longer translate your depth for shallow minds. You no longer ask permission to exist. You do not rebel. You clarify. Clarity becomes your defiance. Firmness becomes your compassion. Limits become your way of loving. And that terrifies the world, accustomed as it is to compliance and staged smiles. Your silence exposes. Your authenticity unmasks. And soon others whisper, "You've changed." These words are not accusations. They are confessions. Confessions that you no longer play their game. Carl Jung would recognize in this path the process of individuation, the confrontation with shadow, the dismantling of persona, the emergence of the true self. He would say, the agreeable man never rules because he never exists as himself. He is a ghost shaped by others. The sovereign man, the one who integrates his shadow and accepts his scars, stands firm. If you want strength, abandon the script. Stop laughing when you do not feel joy. Stop listening just to maintain peace. Stop dressing for belonging. Stop saying yes to what disgusts you. Begin to choose with precision. The rooms you enter, the voices you hear, the gazes you meet. Do this not out of superiority, but because your life has become sacred ground. And slowly, the world responds, not with applause, but with space, with silence, with respect. For the one who cannot be manipulated begins to be admired. And what is admired soon becomes followed. This is the irony. When you stop trying to be loved, you become magnetic. Because you ask for nothing, you simply are. The agreeable man lives on the surface. But the man who has endured rejection, who has buried his mask, becomes solid as rock. He does not seek, he does not perform, he stands. Attend that funeral. Wear silence. Lay to rest the version of yourself that survived by pretending. Do not look back. For once you have crossed this threshold, there is no return. What you once called need was addiction. What you once called love was survival. What you defended as empathy was fear of rejection. But something inside you has already shifted. Perhaps it has no name yet. Perhaps it is only unease. But something in you has died. And good. Because sometimes, only through death can one finally be born. From here, the world will resist you. It will mock, try to drag you back to the obedient version of yourself. But you have already walked without applause. You have already carried silence without breaking. And once you know that strength, you cannot unknow it. The man who walks in silence, even under jeers, is freer than the man who dances under ovations. And if these words strike something inside you, it is because a part of you is also tired of pretending. Perhaps you too are ready to bury the agreeable mask. If so, let your silence, not your performance, speak.